This next story is about the generational divide, how different people of different ages view different topics, things like climate change, but also things like sexism or racism, or even just the accusations of those kind of things. There's a term swirling nowadays, okay boomer. It's going viral, being used by those who are in their teens or even younger, maybe young adults, to try and say to an older person, for example, that their views are out of touch or old-fashioned. Some are calling it a rallying cry for Generation Z. To discuss things a little further, we've got Duhin, Nanda and Shannon joining us from downtown Toronto for more on okay boomer. All right, so Shannon, your read on what this actually means here. When somebody says to you, or when you say to somebody, okay boomer, what are you trying to say?
I feel like for a very long time now, a lot of baby boomers have taken the term millennial and they've turned it into something that's a little derogatory or a little bit negative towards us. And I feel like this is our chance to kind of take that power back and kind of turn it on them instead and kind of use the term baby boomer in a little bit of a derogative way. Obviously, we're doing it in a very joking way, but to me, it means any chance to let an older person know that when they're poking fun at us, we can turn that right around and then poke fun at them.
Is this kind of thing doing ageist, though? In other words, are you targeting baby boomers and saying, yeah, okay, boomer, you're totally out of touch, you got no idea what you're talking about, go sit in a corner, thank you very much?
Well, somebody this morning told me that baby boomer is called so because the moment they hear something they don't agree with, boom, they become babies. But, I'm just kidding. I actually am not so much of a boomer hater, to be honest, because I've been lucky to have good boomers in my life. But you're right, there's a lot of them out there who are calling this a slur, some even comparing it and calling it the N-word of ageism, which is totally out of line. In fact, to the point that even the dictionary had to step in and clarify that a boomer is a term literally meant for somebody born between 1946 and 1965, and it is in no way a slur. So people need to just calm down a little bit.
Why is it, Shannon, though, just to push back a little bit, why is it that the folks who are in sort of the millennial Gen Z category, why are they right?
Why are they right? Ooh, that's a very good question. It's not that we're necessarily in like a right or wrong. I don't know if I necessarily see it that way, but there are certain issues that I feel like are getting blamed on us, or there's certain stereotypes that are being given to us. So like I said, it's just our way of retaliating back to these baby boomers and letting them know that, no, certain topics aren't necessarily our fault. They could maybe more line with your fault, but it's not like we're poking either way. So.
I think climate change, Duhin, is kind of an interesting one as well, because, this is something that is very important to a lot of people from a certain generation, to a lot of people from a lot of different generations, but there may be a difference in how important it actually is. Or I'm thinking about Greta Thunberg, of course, and the different roles that she has played, and there have been some who say, okay, enough is enough, and then others who say, okay, hold on a second, this woman really has something to say. She's a teenager, of course, but she's got a lot of important things on a very important issue here, and you can kind of see how people might have different opinions just of her.
Absolutely, because when a lot of these baby boomers were young, when they were 15, 16 years old, they were able to blissfully ignore these problems because they weren't facing them in such a serious and real way as it is to us. Everything from the huge disparity between income and housing prices to living in a digital age with an overwhelming amount of information and how we're navigating through that. Being in a job market with absolutely no job security, but with an abundance of overqualified and overeducated people who are buried in student debt. I mean, these are things that you can't really argue with because it's just what's happened as a result of the situation out there right now. And so it's not so much that we're complaining and that we're trying to say that we're right. It's just a plea for some understanding. I mean, I was just talking to a friend of mine the other day who's 22 years old, and we're talking about this documentary that we watched on Netflix called Game Changers and the benefits of adapting a plant-based lifestyle, and not only how much it can affect our health, but the environment. And in walked somebody who was, in their 50s, and they kind of were making fun of us, saying, you kids, you need to stop worrying about this stuff. When we were that age, we just worried about where we're going to go get some chicken wings. And I'm like, yeah, well, that's why we're sitting here talking about environmental problems, because you didn't care about it back in the day. And so there's that discrepancy that's definitely causing some problems.
Yeah, and whether it's about the environment or about race issues or about gender issues, terminology that we use, how we refer to people if they want to self-identify, and all of this kind of stuff. I mean, to a certain extent as well, Shannon, it can sometimes break down along perhaps politically ideological division, where some on the left versus some on the right. It's gotten to the point where there's even, you know, now apparel being sold, and we're going to show this sweatshirt, which is an OK Boomer sweatshirt, and it says at the bottom, "Have a terrible day. OK Boomer, have a terrible day." I mean, how much of this as well is just that, you know, with social media, people like this kind of stuff, the trends, they say it, they put it on a video, and it becomes kind of like a, you know, a meme of sorts.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like this has always been an issue generation after generation. Of course, when the baby boomers were younger, I'm sure that they had issues with the generations that were older than them. And it's going to happen again with us when we look down on younger generations as we get older. So I feel like, but since we're in the age of social media and we're in the age of memes, this has become so huge and we can communicate it so much better because we have things like Twitter and all of these memes and things. So it definitely has expanded the whole issue, and it's given people a platform in order to complain about baby boomers, and baby boomers then complain about millennials, and it just goes on from there.
You know, and so you see this stuff coming up on TikTok as well as people post on social media, different things about boomers. The other interesting thing doing as well is, you know, doing a little bit of research before I came on the air, and there are those who say, you know, the term boomer is actually not necessarily only about baby boomers. It can be anybody who doesn't get it. So you can sort of say to someone, for example, someone who's a Gen Z could say to you, Duhin, as a millennial, they could say, "Okay, boomer," to you. It doesn't mean you're a baby boomer, because obviously you're not, but it's still kind of sending that message.
No, you're absolutely right. Like, I would say the translation of that is pretty much, ugh, old people just don't get it. And how old that is, that doesn't necessarily matter. I mean, I've caught myself being like, and in talking about Generation Z, being like, oh my God, those kids on their TikTok and obsessed with Snapchat and, you know, and it's just, I find myself and I'm like, okay, maybe I need to stop talking down to them a little bit, but it's just like Shannon said, it's generational. It's always going to be there. And no matter how much we try, there's going to be that divide, and it's a result of the environment that you grow up in and the situations that you're faced with. So there's always going to be a difference. But I think what makes it better for everybody is to not be as judgmental, not be condescending, and try to understand and look at things from their perspective. So kids these days, who I find are struggling a lot more with anxiety and depression as a result of constant social media exposure. I can't just tell them, hey, get off social media, go outside and play, because it's not that easy. And so you have to understand what they're faced with and how they've grown up and what best way you can do to actually make them feel more supported.
Okay, boomers, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Ted.
We're not the boomers, actually.
Duhin, Nanda, and Shannon Burns. Great to have the two of you with us.
Thanks, Todd.